I know there's people in the room that are like, challenge accepted. All right, so a couple of quick notes about this talk. First, I wrote it at 5 a.m. this morning. I know there's people who are like, a lot of you are like, well, that's expected. That's the way John does all of his presentations. The other thing, this has been kind of a rough week, not just because it's the end of DerbyCon. Lost my aunt at the beginning of the week. Her funeral's right now. And also I've been sick, so I apologize if I'm a little bit off. I might be a little bit more subdued and less insane than normal. Maybe it's all for the best for presenting anyway. So let's get into it. We need to have a conversation, or at least continue having conversations whenever it comes to cyber attribution and cyber deception. One of the things I constantly hear still to this day, and I believe my first DerbyCon presentation was on this topic, so I thought it was fitting that my last DerbyCon presentation would be on this topic. And it's getting better, but we still have conversations like this, where Brian Krebs says deception technologies are nice, but advisable only if your organization is already doing 99% of the rest of the basic security stuff. As it happens, a lot of the really cool tech advertised at RSA is for a very exclusive audience, and he's wrong. I hate to call out Brian Krebs because that's not a fight I'm gonna win. That's not going to work. But I'm gonna make my case on the next slide. It's kind of like arguing with Bruce Schneier. Once on Security Weekly, and it's in the archives, Bruce Schneier literally was arguing with me on cross-site scripting and cross-site forgery, and he said something to the effect of, "But I'm Bruce Schneier." I'm like, well, crap, I'm done. Jeff Moss, founder of Black Hat and DEF CON, also a really, really smart person, was at Black Hat Europe last year, and he said one interesting omission, Moss said, was the apparent lack of use of deception technology. I never heard one speaker say, and then I checked my canary, or I reviewed the deception tech. Who here uses deception technology? And like 3 or 4 people in the audience about this size, maybe larger, raised their hands. And it's like, well, see, deception's crap. And I don't necessarily believe that that's the case either. Honestly, when we're looking at deception technology, it's not like you go up to a company, hey, are you guys using deception technology? And like, yes, we do. You've just missed the point of deception technology. But a lot of us in this industry, we grew up, and the idea of even getting the basics and fundamentals, we never really got that. And that's important, and I want to explain why. If you've been in this industry for about 20 years, please raise your hand. Okay, cool. God, we're all old. Now, of all of you that just raised your hand and you've been in this industry for 20 years, the crap that we were trying to get work 20 years ago, is it working now? No, we're still fighting the damn things. It's like, oh, I need help with my firewall configuration. Shouldn't that have been worked out like in the mid-90s? No, apparently not. So we have this tendency to kind of focus on the things that we know, firewalls, IDS, IPS, things like that, and eschew away from things that would be considered new, even though deception technology is clearly not new. So the purpose of this conversation today is I want to be on the record, and I want to say we use deception technology and we checked the canary tokens. And I also want to share with you, not necessarily the names of customers, but as a pen testing firm, we see deception technology with varying levels of effectiveness. But let's go through and get started. Let's start out with Brian Krebs. Once again, making it very clear, Brian Krebs, I love you. What you do for the industry is awesome, but you were wrong. And the reason why I have this slide, I used to have the Verizon data breach report from 2013, and it's not 2013 anymore. And earlier this year, I had someone that pulled the detection methods out of a recent Verizon data breach report. You can actually query that data directly. And there's a bunch of things on this slide that are indications of exactly where the state of security is in relation to the technologies that we use. I'm going to focus all the way over on the large organizations. I know we have some small organizations represented here in this room, but the vast majority of the people that are in this room work for companies that can afford to send people to DerbyCon, and let's kind of focus on that. One of the things that concerns me is at the top, if we look at how organizations detect they're compromised, the top one by far and away is 42.9%, and it's external monitoring services, or MSSPs. So how many of you in this room are penetration testers? Cool, raise your hands. Cool, awesome. Now, how often do MSSPs actually catch you? Very rarely, right? Years ago, we used to, well, I'm not going to mention the vendor, they're actually here, but we had this problem where one of the vendors couldn't even detect clear text command and control like Netcat. See, it's going to be in the presentation, Ed. Absolutely, keeping the fire alive. And clear text Netcat command and control, and they wouldn't detect it. And finally, I started writing little things like, hey, people at company X, if you can detect this, please call me. And they never did. I guess they wrote a signature for my name, though, because one of our customers, whenever I did that, they're like, yeah, we got a signature hit on the C2 on your name. Hi, this is John Strand. Call me. So that concerns me, because by and large, most MSSPs don't do very well. The other thing that concerns me is if you notice, a bunch of these are external. I went through and I put red around all of them, and the top one should be red as well. Something like over 65% of all the detects in the Verizon data breach report from last year were from external entities. It was not a technology that was super awesome, whiz bang, that they had purchased. They didn't purchase an awesome firewall, IDS system, IPS system. It was somebody else outside of the organization detected the incident. And this sucks, because all those old people and the graybeards and the very, very near to be graybeards, we've been trying to get a lot of this technology to work for over 20 years, and it's still not working as much as we would like it to work. And I also want to make it clear that I'm not saying that deception technology is going to fix that and we can replace everything. I'm just saying, whenever we're looking at security today, we've all been granted a set of tools. And we believe that those are the only tools that are available to us. And we need to start looking a little bit differently on the tools that we can use. We shouldn't just be looking at standard IDS, IPS, firewalls, AV, EDR, UBEA, and all of those different things, because those things are fine. It's just they absolutely do have some gaps. So let's get started. So another useless threat on, another useless rant on threat intelligence feeds. Many of you attend our webcast or have been to a class by me. You know my feelings on these. I think threat intelligence feeds are complete garbage, at least the way that most organizations use them. And the reason why I believe that is because they are, but the reason why I believe that is because the whole concept is fundamentally broken. You go back years ago into the 90s, bringing up Marcus Random, the 6 dumbest ideas in computer security, and one of those 6 dumbest ideas was blacklisting. And many threat intelligence feeds are merely more complicated blacklists. We don't ever encounter a customer where they're like, God, they caught BHIS because of their threat intelligence feed. It doesn't work that way. And recently, one of the data breach reports from like Mandiant or Verizon, I can't remember, they went and they checked of all the threat intelligence feeds, how much overlap did they actually have. Does anyone know what the overlap of a whole bunch of different threat intelligence feeds were? No, it wasn't 0. It was what? No, it wasn't 80%. It was like 10%. That 3% was a different report, but I do remember that one. But it was 10%, and I'm being generous. So do you know what the recommendation of the report was when it came to threat intelligence feeds? Buy all of them. But let's back up and let's figure out what the goal is of a threat intelligence feed. A goal is to try to learn about attackers, right? There's this huge lack of knowledge of what offensive cyber actually looks like. Even though a bunch of people at this conference are very much red team focused, Ed and I have probably taught more people on offensive capabilities than anybody else on the planet, but there's always more. And whenever we're teaching our classes, we always have these students that come up to us and they're like, Ed, is it really this easy? It's like, yeah, kind of is. But we're buying this intelligence to get a better understanding. And maybe there's a better way that we can get intelligence, but it's not something that we purchase or something that's old. It's not months out of date, but something that's more up to what we're doing. Now, a little bit about attackers, especially when you're dealing with nation-state level attackers. I'm not going to have anybody raise their hands for this, but if you have ever done cyber offensive operations for a government, the United States government or any other governments, if Chinese government, if you're here, raise your hand. Everyone in this room owes you a beer. We just want to say thank you. We appreciate it. And Russian governments, huh? Once again, we probably owe you as well. We owe them a vodka, right? So some people are like, no, you owe me vodka, right? But they have one rule, and that rule is don't get caught, don't get caught, don't get caught. That's the rule, right? And that means that there's a higher level of paranoia with a lot of these attackers, that they just do not want to get caught. But the risk of getting caught is very low for many of them. But if we can increase that risk, we are actually going to impact the speed at which they're taking over organizations as well. So getting started. Canary tokens. Canarytokens.org from Thinkist is amazing. You can actually go to their website. I'm sure we'll end up bombing it with everybody going there right now. But you can download Canary tokens and you can run it in your own organization. And we actually have set up Canary tokens and we have it running at BHIS and we have a number of customers that are running it because it's stupid easy. They have made it very, very, very simple to set up token technology. So let's go through some of them. Also, some of the technology is in ADHD, the Active Defense Harbinger distribution, and you can pull that down at blackhillsinfosec.com/projects ADHD. Don't pull it down today, though. One, we don't want to crash the network here at the hotel again, but we're going to be releasing an update as soon as I get home the week after next. I've got a whole update that I did just for my class that I ran the last 2 days. So scenario recon. If we go through attack phases and cover how an attacker will go after an organization, we have an entire class on that, 4 days dedicated to it. There's a number of things that we can cover very quickly, and the goal of the different technologies and techniques that I'm going to talk about are things that you all can set up in your organization without bringing in attorneys and not having to go through crazy change management, talking about impact to the organization and, oh, we're going to stand up full high interaction honeypot servers, but rather trying to come up with stupid, simple things that you can turn on very quickly and get some level of attributional technology and deception technology working. The first one I'd like to talk about is AWS keys. I have on the next slide, or here in a little bit, the number of security firms that are simply crawling the entire internet and looking for open S3 buckets or keys that are on GitHub repositories is disturbing. If you are one of those firms where you're crawling the internet constantly looking for open S3 buckets and keys that are exposed, you are jackasses. I'm going to be blunt about that. And don't get me wrong, we love ourselves some stunt hacking. That's great. But if you're trolling the internet, finding open S3 buckets, and you're like, look at all this data we found, and you run right to the reporters to actually disclose it publicly, that's not novel. You're not really doing anybody a favor. There are some researchers that are working very diligently to come up with tools to improve the security of people to identify if they have S3 buckets and things in Google Cloud Compute and Azure that are exposed. And that's what we need. So let's catch them. So what you can do is you can generate a token and you can put this up on a GitHub repository and basically call it something like super secret AWS keys and make it completely publicly exposed. And then an attacker will try to run or access that S3 bucket with something like S3 Explorer. And if they try to jump in, it's going to say, unable to perform this requested action. You can't get to this bucket. I'm sorry. But in the background, you'll get an alert and notification. And it'll actually pop up and say that somebody is trying to access this bucket, this S3 bucket that you have. And you can see the IP address and the date timestamp. Now, to be completely honest with you, trying to do geolocation based on IP address is problematic. A little bit later on in the presentation, I'm going to give you some tips on how you can get a little bit more refined resolution into where an IP address is. So if you have something like this and it says this is the IP address, it's usually off by quite a bit. And I'll demonstrate that and show you how you can get a little bit closer and get a little bit more accurate with identifying the IP addresses. Once again, that context is, I have a couple of articles up here. You see them all the time where people are talking about, oh, look at all this data that's available on Amazon. You have the Decipher website, which I've got to be honest with you, I actually love the content at Decipher, but their color scheme, it makes my eyes bleed. It is absolutely horrific. Somebody needs to change that immediately. All right, executables. How can we actually come up with an executable and get an attacker to actually run that executable? This is something we just got done talking about in class. So it is very common for organizations to share executables, in particular for VPNs, right? So you can say, in order to access our VPN, you have to use this specific version of our VPN software, and they share that client out someplace. It is absolutely possible to put some geolocation and some tracking inside of those executables, whether or not you're doing it for legitimate usage of those VPNs, or if you want to stand up a fake VPN service and have some type of attribution associated with it. So you can create these executables, put them out on the internet somewhere where an attacker would run across them, a help desk folder, a share someplace, and then they would download them, run them, and then you were able to identify that IP address right there is somebody who's interacting with something they shouldn't. And this becomes a theme in the rest of this presentation. That's cyber threat intelligence, folks. Not a story about, oh, this company got hacked using this particular technique in Ohio. We can see, well, this particular IP address right now just downloaded something that no one should ever interact with, and we now have a connection directly from that IP address. They're the ones that are coming after you, and that's great. Because when you're buying threat intelligence feeds and you have IP addresses or even hashes, the attackers are constantly modifying their techniques to stay in front of the wave of detection, where if you can see what they're doing right now, then it's applicable to your organization in a way that threat intelligence feeds are not. So the setup, we just create an executable binary profile. You can upload any executable of your choice. I just did Rufus for this just because it was in my my downloads folder. Threw it up, and then a little bit later, it generates the canary token. I can download it, and then if you run it, I called it free candy because, hey, why not? And then it pops up and it says the signed executable. We have the source IP address, gives us the date timestamp. Is my audio getting weaker? I don't know if someone's turning it down or it's just going away. But now we have a lot of information about who actually executed it. But the problem I have with this one is the channel for the callback is actually DNS. The way canary tokens works is some of the canaries will beacon back directly to an IP address, and other canaries will resolve a name, a host name, and you can pick that up and do some tracking based on the resolution of that host name. DNS resolution is not all that great. Wouldn't it be better if we actually had a real executable whose sole purpose in life was doing geolocation? And I'll show you, we're actually releasing some code here that actually does just that as well. Then the other thing that we can do is, why not make it real? Almost any VPN software that anybody in this room is actually running, they have scripts that can execute whenever somebody logs into that VPN. So why go through the effort of trying to create an executable that's going to do geolocation and do all these different things, when instead you can just use the built-in functionality of your VPN? And I'm just using OpenVPN as an example. With OpenVPN, you can set up scripts that as soon as somebody authenticates, you will run PowerShell. You can run Python. You can run program file, or cmd.exe from the system itself. And then you can just use your imagination insofar as what you want from any systems that connect. Now, I get questions all the time. They're like, well, wait a minute, how do we differentiate between our users and anybody that's trying to attack? You do this in two ways. One, you can fire it for every single connection that's made in through your VPN, and that would be just fine. There's no problems with that because you're at least collecting that log data and that telemetry so you can see what is going on. The other thing you could do is you could stand up an OpenVPN instance that's not connected into your environment. And I think that last part is really important. And anytime an attacker tries to download OpenVPN and run OpenVPN, it's running someplace other than your organization, but you're getting full location and attributional information about the attacker that actually connected to that OpenVPN system. So far, none of this, as long as you aren't running like download and execute Meterpreter. If you're just trying to trace route, if you're just trying to get IP address information, you're just trying to find out where the attacker is, you're probably okay. I'm not going into laws very much in this presentation at all, but a great ruling is US versus Jerome Hackenkamp, and in that the judge ruled It is one thing to track a computer system by its IP address or geolocation information in an effort to track it down. It is something else entirely different to violate federal wiretapping laws to do so. So that's a bright, shiny line. If you're going to try to implement any of these things, make sure it's set up for IP address and locational information, because at the very least, you'll have some case studies and some case law that you can actually lean upon as well. So some ways that you can do this: you can actually put these executables in a variety of different directories on your web server. Disallow, no index, no follow for all user agent strings, registration, admin page, admin email, whatever. Places that a normal user would never go to, you can actually put them in. Also, you can query wireless networks that are nearby, and you can do this with NetSH WLAN, and you can show the networks. And I'm going to share with you some code that we have written at Black Hills Information Security that you can easily convert into an executable or put it into a macro in an Excel spreadsheet that'll trigger and do this type of search based on the concepts of Honey Badger, and it's in the Honey Badger framework, but extending it a little bit so we can actually get executables and full macros built into it as well. Cloned websites. I love this one. So what you can do is, if you have a website that is an authentication portal, it requires user ID and it requires a password, you can put this snippet of code. You can actually obfuscate this code fairly easily, but you put this snippet of code in that page. And then anytime an attacker goes through and clones that site, as soon as the site stands up, and they stand up PHP or Nginx, it's going to reach out and try to grab the JPEG to render that server properly. And you're going to be able to identify the IP address of that server before a single spam message is sent to you. So we run this on our servers. Attacker clones it. You get an alert. You add that into the block list for your email gateway, and now, or even on your egress, leaving your environment, and now you're never going to see those emails from that spear phishing server hit your inboxes. And if somebody tries to go through it, you can block it. And I go back to cyber threat intelligence, right? Well, we're going to buy cyber threat intelligence, and we're going to say, well, here's all the different websites that were used for spear phishing attacks. We should block those. Those were used last week. Those were used a month ago. The attackers have moved on. If you do this, you're getting attribution and cyber threat intelligence for an attacker that's going after your organization right now, and you're stopping that attack before it even starts. And that's ultimately what we're trying to get. So this is actually one of the technologies that we run at Black Hills Information Security, because I want to be able to say, we checked our deception technology and we saw our alerts, because now we're on the record, somebody's actually saying that. So we receive these periodically. I'll show you a map that shows all the ones that we've gotten in the past year, but we're able to actually go through and set up filters so these sites are not accessible, so people can't get to them. Or we can basically filter emails that come in with links going to these websites as well. This is awesome. This is easy. This is not setting up a honeypot and watching that honeypot closely. This is not setting up a full Windows 2003 box to see if a hacker can break into it. This is stuff that I think we all should be doing, because this is the cyber threat intelligence that matters far more than anything that you can actually purchase. So this is the history. I just pulled this morning. These are all the different IP addresses that have cloned the Black Hills Information Security website that I've stood up all over the place. So yeah, this works. So we checked our cyber deception technology and we checked our tokens, and this is what we actually saw. And it works pretty well. By the way, I know some of you are like, I can't wait till he releases the slides. I'm going to remove the bar. No, I took screenshots of the picture with the bar, so it's not going to show. You guys are laughing because I know that's what you were going to do, because I've done it in the past. All right, so Word docs. So I actually used this slide in this picture from Dr. Seuss in one of my presentations, and we had the would you run it from a share? Would you run it from a chair? Would you run it from Tor? If the FBI comes, should you open the door? And they were like, you should just write a whole Dr. Seuss book like that. Maybe if I have more time, right? We can actually use Word documents, and we can track Word documents whenever they open. We talked about this a number of years ago at my first DerbyCon. And I wanted to share that with you and kind of give you some additional technologies and techniques that you all can use. This has been around forever, and it works really, really well. You put documents up someplace where they shouldn't be. Like, for example, let's say you're a pen testing firm. You could create a website called files.pentestingfirm.com, and you could load these files up there, make them look like, I don't know, reports from customers, and see who's actually crawling around trying to find your reports, pulling down those documents, opening those documents, and find the people that are actively going after your pen testing company. Hypothetically, you could totally do that. So this morning, my brother is staying with me down at the Galt House, and Brian works with us at Black Hills Information Security. And I got up at 5 a.m. and I sent him this email. It basically said, please open this, thanks, with a randomly named document attached to it. Now, any other employee I would hang out with, I would let you guys sleep until like 6:30 before I got you up. Not me. No, not with my brother. I'm like, Brian, what? Brian, what? Brian, can you open up this document? No. Brian, what? Open the document. What document? I just sent it to you. Oh, God. Hey, Brian, I take the pillow off the top of his head. Brian, open this document. So he's like, what do you want? Just open your computer and open this document. He's like, God, this sucks. And he opened up this email and he's like, is this legit? I'm like, no, dude, open it. I don't think I should. I think I should call CJ, our COO. I'm like, no, I'm the owner of the goddamn company and your older brother. Open this document or I'm going to beat you. And it's okay because you're my brother. The police will be like, carry on. All right. So he opens up the document and we generated the alert. And the whole time he did it, he's like, I'm failing something here. Like, my brother's testing me for social engineering, you know. At what point will you talk? Waterboarding's next. Quick, into the bathroom. I hate waterboarding. So, but yeah, it triggers, and we actually get the source IP address, and I put in the token reminder of, he opened it. So that was fun. Now, here's a problem. So he opened up this document, and the document fired, but it's not really all that accurate. It put us way down by Walmart whenever he opened the document on his computer. And he was joined to the hotel wireless network, which, once again, I'm sorry, I tried to get him to do that. We're not supposed to do that. I'm like, join the hotel wireless network. I don't want to join the hotel wireless network. Join the hotel wireless network, Brian. It's just going to be for a few seconds. I'm going to call systems on you. I'm like, oh, come on. This is quick. Let's do it. So he opened it up, and that's where it opened from. Now, you know that we're not there. We're actually downtown Louisville, so that wasn't all that accurate. But I want to share with you how you can get a little bit better granularity, because that sucks, right? So one of the things you can do is trace route to that particular IP address. What you do is you trace route, and then you take the last routing hop, which is at the bottom of the screen, and then you take that IP address and you geolocate that IP address. The reason why this works is most of the IP addresses for home users in particular, those IP addresses are handed out via DHCP. So it doesn't really know where you are. It's going to be within the town, maybe, if you're in South Dakota, the state, but it's going to give you this random DHCP IP address, and you're going to be all over the place. But with routing infrastructure, we tend to get a lot closer. So you take that last IP address and you geolocate that instead, and that's where the point of presence is for routing. And as you can see, it was about a block away from where we are. So that's pretty cool, right? So that gets us a little bit more accurate. I've done some cyber deception and hacker tracking classes for the United States military, and it always disturbs me whenever they look at something like this and they're like, oh, that's good. That's close enough. For what? Oh, God. All right. But the document that you generate from Canary tokens, and we're planning on contributing to this project a lot more now that I have some more time, they're not tracking in all the ways that you should be. And that means that their tracking doesn't fire for a lot of Linux document processors, LibreOffice, and I know people are like, whoa, you can use LibreOffice on Windows. I'm like, why the hell would you do that? Once again, if anyone's here from LibreOffice, you have one job. be compatible with Microsoft Office. Do that, please. And they just fail at it all the time. So in the Active Defense Harbinger distribution, we have Word web bugs. And Word web bugs use cascading style sheets, and they also use image source tags. So you can use both of those, and you tend to get a lot more accurate, and a bunch more of the text editors that are out there will fire. So you'll get Abbey Word will fire, LibreOffice will fire, you'll get Apple Text Edit on some versions of Mac will fire, and then also Microsoft Word. And Microsoft Word's for Word for Mac, it works for Word for Windows, it works for all those different versions. So this increases the number of document editors that'll actually beacon back. Now, once again, we're not standing up a honeypot. We're not doing any of that. We're just creating documents and seeding them around the environment and seeing who opens them. Another way that you can run that, God, there's a spider. I killed it. Okay, we're good. So the other thing that you can do with this is think in terms of incident response. If you have a computer system that you believe to be compromised, you could drop a document on that computer system, like something juicy the attacker is absolutely going to want to open. What would be a good name of a document that an attacker would want to open? Passwords.doc, right? Not that that has ever happened, Sony. But and by the way, I want to make it very clear, we have friends that worked at Sony security team, and they're awesome. They were awesome. A lot of them have moved on. And it wasn't Sony's fault. For years, I remember talking with them, and they're like, we want to do the right thing, but it's just budget and management. They were not the exception. They were the norm. They're much like every other organization. But yeah, they had documents with passwords.doc, which is very helpful for attackers. One step forward, this is one that was contributed by Bo. I think I asked you all yesterday at about 5. I was like, hey, you guys the pen test that you had cyber deception? And Bo sent me this one. This is a company that was running Javelin. And I absolutely love Javelin, except there's a couple of things. Once again, I love any of the cyber deception vendors that are out there. Anyone, Ativo, Elusive, all of those, they're amazing. Symmetria, who just got bought, so Gotti got his company bought, which is awesome, good for them. But Javelin was always a bit weird to me. Javelin's whole claim to fame is, we use machine learning for cyber deception. I'm like, oh, that's cool. How? Well, what we use is artificial intelligence to machine learn your network. I'm like, how? And what they did was, and what they do is, and I'm picking on them now because they're owned by Symantec. There's a big, long history between us and Symantec that goes back to DerbyCon about 4 years ago. And what they do is they learn your user pattern for how you create user accounts, like last name, first initial, last name, and also the naming of the machines. And then they stand up all kinds of different machines with that naming convention and user accounts with that naming convention. That's it. That's how they use artificial intelligence and machine learning. Now, just out of curiosity, I mean, that's kind of neat, but how many of you could actually name fake machine accounts and fake user accounts using your naming convention at work? Not enough of you just raised your hands. That's a little bit disturbing. Thank you for raising both to kind of help humanity as much as possible. Unfortunately, Bo discovered that whenever you're pulling this information, you see the last, it's log off time, right? Log off time. The last log off time was December 31st, 1600 at 7 p.m. How the hell do you come up with that type of epoch time, right? So all of them, that is epoch time. It's never logged off ever, which is weird because a lot of epoch time in memory on Windows is January 1st, 1601. I don't know why this is almost a day earlier, but whatever. It's Active Directory. And I know that this January 1st, 1601 is generally agreed upon as beginning of the Gregorian calendar, but that's a whole nother conversation. So it's pretty easy to identify these. So if you're with Javelin, you probably need to use some machine learning to randomize those last log-off dates. Yeah, we use artificial intelligence to find out what time it is, and then we log it off. That'll help. So how do you do that for free? Sorry, I hate that. Like I said, I love Javelin. They were bought out by Symantec. That's great. And now I'm like, here's how you don't have to pay for it, which seems wrong. But one of the things you can do is you should do this anyway. Just go into your environment and create honey users in Active Directory. Now, in my example, I actually named it admin ADM, administrator. And don't worry at all about being too obvious, please, because as pen testing company, everyone names their administrator accounts the most obvious things in the world. Like, well, this is the SCADA admin account. You know it's the SCADA admin account because it's named SCADA admin. Or the domain administrator, what should we call it? Domain admin? Sound good? Yeah, domain admin sounds like a good idea. Let's do that. So be obvious. The attackers are absolutely going to go after it. This is the important part, though. This is really important. You need to set its logon hours to none of them. Like, you can't log in ever with this account. And I told my class some things that I did years ago when I was younger. One of the administrators that I worked with, he was kind of a jerk. So I went into the profile and I set his log off hours to be a smiley face on this grid. So he'd be working and then all of a sudden his computer wouldn't work. He's like, what the hell happened? An hour later it would come back. And I'd just be like, right eye, right eye. He's like, what do you mean? Oh, you'll figure it out. But it was a full smiley face there. The other reason why this is important is it was earlier this year, or it was actually last year. Derek Banks called me up. And I don't think Derek's here at this conference this week. I wish he was. But Derek goes, hey, John. I'm like, yeah, I think I found a honeypot account. I'm like, why? Well, it's a domain admin and it has a password. It was something like password 1234. I think it's a honey account. I'm like, well, is it really a domain admin? He goes, yes. I'm like, well, then use that. That's not a honeypot. That's a vulnerability at that point. And I think we actually did talk to them, and they were like, well, you found our honeypot account. It's like, okay. We need to talk. That's not what I said in the webcast. But the attacker won't necessarily go after these accounts directly. Usually what they'll do is they'll just do a password spray using a tool like Domain Password Spray, and they will pull all the user accounts and use a password of summer 2019 against every single account, and it's indiscriminate. So if you have these accounts sprinkled in your environment, you're going to be able to trip some alerts. So you're going to be able to set this up, set up a SIM alert that if anybody ever tries to log in with this account, you can shut it down, or better yet, just shut the entire workstation down. And this is relatively low impact in your organization. If anybody interacts with this account at all, then they need to be treated as a hostile actor in the environment. And also this goes back to, if you're going to use deception technologies, I have people that ask me, they're like, well, we're going to set up a honeypot on the internet on a network connection that has nothing to do with our network connection. That's not a honeypot for your environment. That's a research project for you. You want to put honeynet and deception and attributional technologies in the pathways that an attacker will actually use. So this is absolutely in the pathway that an attacker would actually use it. Trying to clone your website on the outside of your environment is in the pathway in which an attacker will actually use. So when you're hunting, you're always setting up the stand and everything in the paths that what you're hunting will take. The thing is no different when you're dealing with cyber deception and attributional technologies as well. Kerber roasting, we had a customer that was running some tools. They put in a bunch of fake service accounts, and as soon as those service accounts attempted to be interacted with, it automatically generated an alert. And even after all these years of me talking about cyber, like cyber deception and attributional technologies, it's still funny to me how my testers try to play it off like it ain't no big deal if they get busted by one of these things. Like, yeah, well, they detected my Kerber roasting attack, but it didn't really matter. I got domain admin. It's okay. I'm good. No, I'm fine. It's okay. No, it's fine. It's good. I'm like, this is a good thing, though, if we actually get caught. That's ultimately what we're looking for. And I love adding this to report. Effective use of traps. Multiple hosts in the domain were installed as traps. This is actually a customer that was running Canary from Thinkist all over their environment. Activities conducted by BHS reveals that these traps were vulnerable to multiple insecurities and made tempting targets. Any interaction with these hosts triggered alerts and the customer and these to the customer, and these were reported to BHIS during the test. And I might have to change this. I don't know which one of you added this in. Well, these should not be relied on as the sole amount of security. They do provide an added layer of defense, and they absolutely do. If they're put in the proper location and it's the right area that an attacker is going to go through, this is going to create a much more difficult environment to break into. The other thing I love hearing from pen testers, like, well, I'd totally be able to find those honeypots. Funny thing about finding honeypots is if you find a honeypot, you have to interact with the honeypot. And if the interaction of the honeypot goes down, the defenders know you're there. And that's what we're after. And that works really, really well whenever we actually see it deployed in organizations. So always keep that in mind. It's not hard to do. And if you're using something like Symmetria or Thinkist Canary, one of the nice things is they actually maintain those honeypots for you, keep them up to date. If there's any vulnerabilities, it doesn't introduce them into your environment, which is great. Honey Badger update, this is the new stuff that we're releasing. So we had an intern working on this. Eventually it'll get merged into the main Honey Badger with Tim Tomes, but right now my intern and Tim Tomes are kind of fighting with each other, and as near as I can tell, they're both jackasses, and I don't want to take a side in that. It's probably a little bit more than you guys want to deal with, but whenever I hear them talk at each other, I swear to God, it's right on the level of tabs versus spaces, and that just grinds me. But this works, and I'm going to give you the link where the functional version of Honey Badger is right now. But this is just VB that you can convert into an executable, relatively easy to tie into what I mentioned earlier. You can compile it with mono and then run it, and it's going to work. And this is actually far more accurate geolocation. In this situation, it was 77 meters as far as the accuracy. And if it's in an executable or it's in a macro, it's super simple to take that executable and invoke it or like kind of merge it with other executables. Or it's super easy with the macro to actually put it into an Excel spreadsheet. Don't ever use Word documents. I don't want to get into that now. Word documents don't work real well, because even my late grandmother towards the end, she was like, yeah, I'm not going to open this Word document. I'm like, why, Grandma? It has a macro. I'm like, that's so awesome, Grandma. And hackers know that for sure. So use an Excel spreadsheet or put it into an executable, and it'll work really, really well for you. And here's where you can get it. I'll leave it up for a couple of seconds so you guys can take pictures of it with your phone. So go ahead and take a picture of that. But this is the version of Honey Badger that has it. You will need a Google API key to actually utilize it properly. So you will need that because Google's getting a little bit more stringent on API keys these days, so you can download it. All right. Oops, I didn't want to get to that yet. So years ago, my first DerbyCon, or second or third, I can't remember which, I was giving a presentation on cyber deception because that's my broken record thing. And I talked about using cyber deception at a bank in Germany. And I didn't tell the story at the time, but I wanted to now. So years ago, there was a large bank that wanted us to go over to Germany for pen test engagement and a couple of other things. Cyber deception was part of it. And they wanted me to go out over Thanksgiving, which was tough. I didn't want to go out over Thanksgiving, so I sent them a proposal that was 2 times higher than our normal rate, just kind of our go-away rate. And they signed it, which is difficult because it was over Thanksgiving, and I had to go down and tell my wife that we just signed this contract. But it got sweetened even more because they said, so this rate is euros, right? Yes. So I go downstairs and I talk to my wife, and she goes, you signed what? A contract over Thanksgiving? And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to be in Germany. And she goes, this is unacceptable. I can't believe you did this. This is family time. You're traveling all the time. You're teaching all the time. And now you're leaving us for Thanksgiving. All of this is justified, right? Like, I'm not trying to make my wife sound like she's a harpy. That's completely what I was expecting going downstairs. And she's kind of yelling at me, and I set the contract down with the dollar amount, and she's like, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, what are you doing? She goes, I'm going to pack. So we go to Germany, and the beautiful thing about this particular trip is my wife set up everything. She set up the flight, she set up the hotel. The customer told us to stay at the specific hotel, and it was really expensive. And she's like, that's too expensive. So she found a cheaper hotel next to the train station in this town, which some of you that live in Europe, you already know where this is going. So we get off the train, and we're walking down the street, and I'm using GPS. It's kind of, okay, now turn right. I look down the street, and it's nothing but pink and red lights. And my wife's like, and this is a really great hotel that caters to Americans. And I'm like, the only thing that's going through my head is, in the Navy, this hotel will cater to you in the Navy. We know what you'll do. So we walk down this street, and we go up to this. This hotel was actually an hotel because the H sign was burnt out. And it was one of those classy places that had a gate in front of it that you had to buzz into. So we're buzzing the gate, and the lady is like, "What do you want?" I'm like, "Could you please let us in?" So she lets us in. We get up there. We get into the lobby. And she looks at us. She goes, "Oh, my God, you have children." I said, "Yes, we do." She goes, "We're going to need to put new carpet in your bedroom." And her husband just like pops out of the back with this roll of carpet, and he's like, "I'll be right back." And he goes upstairs. And the lady was really nice. She made us dinner, and she's like, "We almost never get, like children here." I'm like, "Clearly you don't." Because for reference, this is the place when you're walking down the street with your family, once again, caters to Americans. You'll have someone say, "Hey, you looking for a good time?" And my kids will be like, "Yes, we are, yes, we are, yes, we are." So the guy goes upstairs, and he puts in the carpet, and then he's like, "Okay, time for bed." And our rooms were 2 rooms adjoined together. And we get snuggled in bed, and we're laying there. And I'm almost in tears because we're in the red light district, and I'm like, what the hell are we going to do? And the other thing that's going through my head is, thank God my wife booked this hotel and not me. Because if I would have done it, I would be in big trouble. So all of a sudden, the male owner of the hotel like throws the door open, comes up next to me and goes, "Don't turn on the television." And then proceeds to unplug the televisions in both our rooms, which my kids see. So naturally, they're like, "What's on TV, Dad? What's on TV?" And this was like a television that every single channel had a different style of porn. It was amazing. It was years before its time. But we ran this technology at this particular customer for about a week. And we had well over 250 people that ran the attributional technology. So if you're ever wondering, will an attacker run this? The answer is yes. We then took all of these IP addresses and the ASNs associated with these IP addresses, and we saw if there were any outbound connections to these network ranges, and we have found 4 systems in their environment that were compromised. That's threat intelligence, folks. We can change the way we look at cyber threat intelligence insofar as what we are actually looking for. We use it to learn about hackers and improve our defenses, and we can do better with deception technology. And I want to be clear, cyber threat intelligence is great when you're researching an IP address or something. It's amazing for those activities. But if you're like, we're going to instrument this and stop attackers from breaking into our environments, more than likely it's not going to work as well as you think, because the attackers aren't using the exact same techniques they did when Mandiant recorded everything that they did. Okay? I want to say thanks. These 2 weeks suck. This is not fun, coming to the last DerbyCon. How many of you have been to every single Derby? How many of you have been to almost all of the DerbyCons? How many of you, is this your first DerbyCon? I'm sorry to all of you that this is your first DerbyCon. At least you're here. I want you all to take some time and don't walk around and talk with friends and sit at your computer. I want you just to take some time, and I want you to walk around and just experience the place. Just walk around and listen. Enjoy the smells, I guess. This was something that was special. It is special. And I want you to spend some time thinking about why it's not here. Read Dave's article about it. Don't be mad at Dave and the DerbyCon staff. They gave us an amazing gift, and we owe them our thanks. So that's it for my time. I want to say thank you very much, everybody. And I hope to see all of you at 8:30 in the morning when I'm releasing Backdoors and Breaches, the card game, up at the BHIS booth. This sounds weird.